I was standing at the kitchen sink, my hands submerged in soapy water, scrubbing at a casserole dish that had seen better days. The evening sun slanted through the window, turning everything amber and warm, the kind of light that makes you forget, just for a moment, that anything could be wrong. "Mommy, why does Daddy hug that woman the way he used to hug you?" My son's voice was curious, not accusatory. He was 6 years old, standing in the doorway with his dinosaur backpack still strapped to his shoulders, his hair sticking up in the back the way it always did after a long day's natter school. His name was Oliver, and he had his father's eyes, deep brown, almost black in certain light. Those eyes were looking at me now, waiting for an answer I didn't have. The dish slipped from my hands and clattered against the metal sink. Water splashed up, soaking the front of my shirt, but I barely noticed. My heart had dropped somewhere into my stomach, and my throat felt like someone had wrapped their hands around it and squeezed. "What woman, sweetheart?" I managed to say, turning toward him slowly. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, too high and thin. "What?" Oliver shrugged, the way kids do when they're talking about something that seems obvious to them. "The lady at the park. The one with the yellow hair. Daddy hugs her a lot when he thinks I'm not looking." I dried my hands on a towel, my movements mechanical, my mind racing. Marcus had taken Oliver to the park every Saturday for the past 3 months. He said it was their special time together, father and son, and I'd been grateful for it. Grateful for the quiet house, for the 2 hours to myself to catch up on laundry or just sit with a cup of coffee and stare at nothing. I'd thought it was sweet the way Marcus made such an effort with Oliver. Our marriage had been strained lately, not broken, just worn thin in places the way fabric gets when you've washed it too many times. I'd told myself that every couple goes through rough patches, that we just needed to reconnect, to remember why we'd fallen in love in the first place. Now, standing in my kitchen, with my son's innocent question hanging in the air between us, I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet. "Does this lady have a name?" I asked, crouching down so I was at Oliver's eye level. I kept my voice gentle even though my pulse was hammering in my ears. He thought about it for a moment, his little face scrunched up in concentration. "I don't know. Daddy calls her Soph, sometimes Sophie. She smells like flowers. And she always brings me juice boxes, the good kind with the bendy straws." Sophie. The name landed like a punch to my chest. I knew exactly who she was. Sophia Chen had started at Marcus's architecture firm about a year ago. She was brilliant, Marcus had told me over dinner one night. Fresh out of grad school with ideas that were going to revolutionize sustainable building design. He'd been excited when he talked about her, animated in a way I hadn't seen in months. I'd been happy for him, glad that he had someone at work who challenged him, who made him excited about his projects again. I'd met her once, at the company holiday party last December. She was striking in a quiet way, tall and slender, with hair that fell in a perfect sheet down her back, so blonde it was almost white. She'd shaken my hand and smiled, and her grip had been firm, confident. She'd complimented my dress, asked about Oliver, made all the right small talk. I'd liked her, or at least, I'd had no reason not to. She was young, maybe 26 or 27, but she'd seemed poised and professional. Marcus had introduced her to everyone with pride, the way you'd show off a prized student or a promising protégé. Now I was picturing her at the park, standing close to my husband, his arms around her. I was imagining Oliver playing on the swings, glancing over and seeing his father holding another woman the way he used to hold me, back when things between us were easy and warm and uncomplicated. "Does Daddy hug her a lot?" I asked Oliver, hating myself for using my child as an informant, but unable to stop myself. He nodded, already losing interest in the conversation. His attention had shifted to the cookie jar on the counter. "Can I have a snack?" "Sure, baby," I said, standing up and retrieving 2 chocolate chip cookies from the jar. My hands were shaking slightly, but I kept my face neutral. Oliver took the cookies and wandered off toward the living room, his backpack finally sliding off his shoulders and hitting the floor with a thud. I stood there for a long time, listening to the sound of cartoons starting up in the other room, trying to make sense of what I'd just learned. My name is Claire Holloway, or it was before I married Marcus and became Claire Whitmore. I'm 34 years old, and up until 5 minutes ago, I thought I had a pretty good handle on my life. I work part-time as a freelance graphic designer, mostly doing logos and branding for small businesses. It's enough to keep me busy without overwhelming me, enough to feel like I'm contributing without sacrificing time with Oliver. Marcus is the primary breadwinner, pulling in a solid 6-figure salary at Fletcher Associates, one of the most prestigious firms in Seattle. We have a nice house in a good neighborhood, a reliable car, a circle of friends we see regularly. On paper, everything looks fine. Great, even. But paper doesn't tell you about the nights when your husband comes home late and barely looks at you, too tired or too distant to engage. It doesn't capture the way conversations have become transactional. Did you pay the electric bill? Oliver needs new shoes, your mother called, stripped of anything deeper or more meaningful. It doesn't show you the last time you made love, really made love, with passion and attention, and the feeling that you were the only person in the world who mattered to him. I couldn't remember when that had been. Months ago, certainly. Maybe longer. I'd told myself it was normal. We'd been married for 8 years, together for 10. The fire dims. That's just reality. You trade passion for stability, for partnership, for the quiet comfort of knowing someone inside and out. You learn to be content with the everyday moments, the small kindnesses, the shared project of raising a child and building a life. Romance is for young people, for people without mortgages and pediatrician appointments and in-laws who need help moving furniture. We were adults, parents, responsible members of society. We were fine. Except we weren't fine. I could see that now, looking back with this new, horrible clarity. Marcus had been pulling away for months, and I'd let him, too busy, or too scared, or too tired to fight for us. And now there was Sophie, with her architectural brilliance, and her blonde hair and her juice boxes with bendy straws, filling whatever space I'd left empty. The front door opened, and I heard Marcus's voice calling out a greeting. He sounded cheerful, light. The sound of it made something twist painfully in my chest. "Hey, Claire, you home?" "In the kitchen," I called back, my voice steadier than I expected. He appeared in the doorway a moment later, loosening his tie, his jacket slung over one arm. Marcus was handsome in a clean-cut, all-American way, square jaw, broad shoulders, dark hair that he kept neatly trimmed. He'd put on a little weight over the years, mostly around his middle, but he carried it well. He still looked like the man I'd fallen in love with in college, when he was a junior and I was a sophomore and we'd met at a mutual friend's birthday party. He'd been studying architecture, passionate about sustainable design even then, and I'd been drawn to his intensity, his vision for how the world could be better, greener, more thoughtfully constructed. "How was your day?" he asked, moving past me to grab a beer from the fridge. He didn't kiss me hello, didn't even really look at me. It was such a small omission, but it felt enormous in that moment. "Fine," I said. Then before I could stop myself, "Oliver mentioned you've been seeing Sophie at the park on Saturdays." I watched his face carefully, looking for any sign of guilt, of panic, of confirmation. But Marcus was good at this, at keeping his face neutral, at controlling his reactions. It was one of the things that made him such a good architect, his ability to present to clients without showing doubt or nervousness. Right now, I hated that skill. "Yeah," he said, twisting the cap off his beer with a practiced motion. "She's been joining us sometimes. She lives near the park, goes for runs there on weekends. We've run into each other a few times." He took a long drink, then looked at me directly for the first time since he'd walked in. "Why? Is that a problem?" The question was casual, but there was something underneath it, something sharp. A challenge, maybe, or a dare. It made me hesitate, second-guessing myself. Was I overreacting? Was there an innocent explanation for all of this? Oliver was 6. Maybe he'd misunderstood what he'd seen. Maybe the hugs were friendly, collegial, nothing more. But Oliver had said the way he used to hug me. That specificity wasn't something a 6-year-old invented. He'd seen something that reminded him of how his parents used to be with each other, back when we were happy, and now he was seeing it directed at someone else. It's just, I started, then stopped, unsure how to proceed. It seems like you're spending a lot of time with her, outside of work, I mean. Marcus set his beer down on the counter, and I could see the muscles in his jaw tightening. She's my colleague, Claire. We work together. We're friends. Is that suddenly not allowed? Of course it's allowed, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, reasonable. I just think it's a little odd that you're bringing her around Oliver without mentioning it to me, and apparently hugging her in a way that confused our son. Jesus Christ, Marcus muttered, running a hand through his hair. Are you seriously interrogating me right now because I gave a friend a hug? This is insane. I'm not interrogating you, I said, but my voice was rising despite my efforts to control it. I'm asking you a question. Our son asked me why you hug another woman the way you used to hug me. That's not nothing, Marcus. That's not me being crazy or jealous or whatever you're about to accuse me of being. He stared at me for a long moment, and I couldn't read the expression on his face. It was somewhere between anger and something else. Something that might have been guilt or might have been resignation. Then he picked up his beer and walked out of the kitchen without another word. I stood there, my hands gripping the edge of the counter, fighting back tears. This was how it was going to go then. Deflection, defensiveness, making me feel like I was the problem for even asking. I heard him in the living room, his voice taking on that bright, warm tone he used with Oliver. Hey, buddy, how was school? Did you finish that dinosaur project? Oliver's excited chatter filled the house, and I felt like an outsider in my own life, standing alone in my kitchen while my husband and son bonded over prehistoric reptiles. I wanted to march in there and demand answers, demand honesty, demand that Marcus look me in the eye and tell me the truth. But I also didn't want to shatter whatever was left of our family, didn't want Oliver to see his parents fighting, didn't want to be the one who broke everything apart based on what might just be a misunderstanding. So I did what I'd been doing for months. I swallowed it down, pushed it aside, and started preparing dinner. That night, after Oliver was in bed, I tried again. Marcus was in our bedroom, scrolling through his phone, already changed into the old college t-shirt and sweatpants that he slept in. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my heart pounding. Can we talk? I asked quietly. He didn't look up from his phone. About what? About us. About everything. He sighed, a long put-upon sound that made me feel small. Claire, I'm tired. Can we not do this tonight? When then? I asked, and I hated how desperate I sounded. When can we talk about the fact that you barely look at me anymore? That you come home late almost every night? That our son is noticing you're more affectionate with your co-worker than you are with your own wife? That got his attention. He set his phone down on the nightstand and finally looked at me. Really looked at me. You want to know why I'm not more affectionate? He asked, his voice low and hard. Because every time I try, you're exhausted. You're busy. You have a headache. You need to finish some project. There's always something, Claire. Always a reason why it's not the right time. The accusation stunned me. That's not fair, I said, my voice breaking. I've been trying. I've been taking care of everything, Oliver, the house, my work, and I'm doing my best. Your best for everyone except me, he shot back. When was the last time you initiated anything between us? When was the last time you made me feel like you actually wanted me, instead of just tolerating me? I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out, because he wasn't entirely wrong. I had been pulling away, building walls, protecting myself from the hurt of his distance by creating distance of my own. It was a cycle, and I couldn't pinpoint when it had started or who had started it. Maybe it didn't matter. I didn't realize, I whispered. No, he said, picking his phone back up. You didn't. We lay in bed that night, back to back, the space between us feeling like a chasm. I couldn't sleep, my mind churning through everything that had been said and everything that hadn't. I kept seeing Sophie's face, her perfect smile, her confident handshake. I kept hearing Oliver's small, confused voice asking why his daddy hugged her the way he used to hug me. Around 2 in the morning, Marcus's phone buzzed on the nightstand. I heard him shift, reach for it, and in the dim light, I could see his face illuminated by the screen. He was smiling, a soft, genuine smile I hadn't seen directed at me in what felt like forever. He typed something quickly, then set the phone back down. I lay there in the darkness, my heart breaking into smaller and smaller pieces, and I knew with absolute certainty that whatever was happening between Marcus and Sophie, it was already too far gone to be nothing. The next morning I made a decision. I needed to know the truth, needed to see it with my own eyes instead of relying on a 6-year-old's observations or my own spiraling imagination. So when Saturday rolled around and Marcus announced he was taking Oliver to the park, I told him I had a grocery run to do, some errands that couldn't wait. He barely acknowledged me, already helping Oliver tie his shoes, and the casualness of his deception made me feel sick. I waited 20 minutes after they left, then drove to Volunteer Park. It was a beautiful early spring day, the kind Seattle is famous for when the rain finally breaks, and the world remembers what sunshine looks like. I parked on a side street where I could see the playground but wouldn't be immediately visible. I felt ridiculous, skulking around like a private investigator in a bad movie, but I needed to know. I didn't have to wait long. Within 15 minutes, I saw her approaching from the north end of the park. Sophie was in running gear, her hair pulled back in a high ponytail, and even from a distance, she looked effortlessly beautiful. She had that kind of natural athleticism that made everything she did look easy and graceful. She spotted Marcus immediately, and her whole face lit up. I watched as she jogged over to where he was standing near the swings, where Oliver was pumping his legs, trying to go higher. Marcus saw her and smiled, that same smile I'd seen on his face when he'd checked his phone in the middle of the night. They stood close together talking, and I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language was unmistakable. The way they leaned toward each other, the way her hand touched his arm when she laughed, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the entire park. Then it happened. Sophie said something, stepped closer, and Marcus wrapped his arms around her. It wasn't a quick, friendly hug. It was long and intimate, his hands splayed across her back, her face pressed against his chest. It lasted 5, maybe 10 seconds, and when they pulled apart, he kept one hand on her waist, lingering. Oliver had seen it too. He'd stopped swinging and was watching them with that same curious expression he'd had when he'd asked me about it. Then he seemed to shrug it off and went back to playing, already used to this new normal. I sat in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, and I felt something inside me crack wide open. This was real. This was happening. My husband was having an affair. I drove home in a daze, barely registering the roads, the other cars, the world moving around me. When I got back to the house, I walked straight to Marcus's home office, a small converted bedroom where he kept his work files and personal papers. I'd never snooped before, had never felt the need to, but now I was ripping through drawers looking for anything that would tell me more about what was going on. I found it in the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet, tucked beneath tax returns and old utility bills. A folder unmarked filled with printed emails. I pulled them out with shaking hands and started reading. They went back 6 months. At first they were innocuous, work discussions, project updates. The kind of thing that could easily be explained away. But then they changed, became more personal. Sophie writing about how much she admired Marcus, how inspired she was by his vision, how she'd never met anyone like him. Marcus responding, opening up about his frustrations at work, his feeling that he wasn't living up to his potential, his sense that he'd settled into a life that was comfortable but not fulfilling. Then came the messages that made me want to throw up. Sophie writing, I can't stop thinking about yesterday. About you. Is that wrong? Marcus responding, It's not wrong if it feels this right. There were dozens of them, hundreds maybe, charting the course of their relationship from professional admiration to emotional intimacy to something that could no longer be denied or explained away. The most recent one, dated just 3 days ago, made my blood run cold. I know this is complicated, Sophie had written. I know you have a family, a life, but I can't keep pretending this isn't what I want. I want you, Marcus. All of you. I'm tired of stolen moments and secret meetings. I'm tired of being the person you run to when things at home are hard, only to watch you go back to her every night. We need to make a choice. Marcus's response, I know, you're right. I can't keep doing this to you, to Claire, to myself. Give me a little more time. I need to figure out how to do this without destroying Oliver's life. But I promise you, Sophie, this is what I want too. You're what I want. I read that exchange 3 times, my vision blurring with tears before I could fully process what it meant. He was planning to leave me. This wasn't just an affair, a mistake, a moment of weakness that could be forgiven and moved past. This was a deliberate choice, a new life he was building with someone else while I remained oblivious, still trying to fix our marriage, still believing we could find our way back to each other. I heard the front door open, heard Marcus's voice calling out that they were home. I quickly shoved the papers back into the folder, stuffed it into the drawer, and tried to compose myself. But when I stood up and caught sight of my reflection in the window, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Her face was blotchy and red, her eyes swollen, her expression one of absolute devastation. I couldn't face them, not yet, not like this. So I did something I'd never done before. I grabbed my purse and my keys and walked out the back door, leaving my husband and son in the house without a word of explanation. I drove without destination, my mind blank with shock and grief. Eventually, I found myself pulling into the parking lot of a coffee shop near the waterfront. I sat there for a long time, watching the ferries come and go, watching people live their normal lives, and I tried to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do now. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Where are you? Oliver wants lunch. I stared at it for a full minute before typing back. I know about Sophie. The response was immediate. What are you talking about? Another message. Claire, where are you? Come home so we can talk. I turned my phone off and tossed it onto the passenger seat. I couldn't talk to him yet. Couldn't hear whatever lies or half-truths he was preparing to spin. I needed time to think, to process, to figure out who I was going to be in the aftermath of this revelation. I stayed in that parking lot for 3 hours. When I finally drove home, it was late afternoon, and the house was quiet. Marcus met me at the door, his face etched with concern that might have been genuine or might have been an act. I couldn't tell anymore. Claire, what the hell is going on? He asked, reaching for my arm. You just disappeared. Oliver was asking for you. Where is he now? I asked, my voice flat. At my mom's. I called her, told her we needed to talk. She picked him up an hour ago. Of course he'd sent Oliver away. He knew what was coming. I found the emails, I said simply, all of them. I know everything, Marcus. His face went pale, and for the first time since this nightmare had started, he looked genuinely frightened. Claire. Don't, I interrupted, holding up my hand. Don't lie to me anymore. Don't insult my intelligence by trying to explain it away. I read them. I saw you with her today at the park. I know you're planning to leave me for her. He stood there frozen, and I could see him trying to figure out what to say, how to spin this. Finally, he seemed to deflate, his shoulders sagging. I'm sorry, he whispered. God, Claire, I'm so sorry. How long? I asked. How long have you been sleeping with her? He flinched at the bluntness of the question. It's not. We haven't. It's been mostly emotional. We've only been physical a few times. A few times, I repeated, my voice hollow. How few? Does it matter? He asked, and there was something almost pleading in his tone. Claire, this isn't about sex. This is about feeling connected to someone, feeling understood, feeling like I matter. You matter to me, I shouted, my composure finally shattering. You're my husband. You're Oliver's father. Of course you matter. No, he said quietly. I'm your obligation. Your co-parent. Your roommate who helps pay the bills. But I'm not your partner anymore, Claire. I haven't been for a long time. The words hit like physical blows, and I found myself sinking onto the couch, my legs no longer able to support me. So this is my fault? I asked. You cheated on me because I wasn't, what? Attentive enough? Affectionate enough? It's not about fault, Marcus said, sitting down across from me, careful to maintain distance. It's about the fact that we've grown apart. We want different things. We've become different people than we were when we got married. And you decided all of this without me, I said bitterly. You decided our marriage was over and started a new relationship without ever giving me a chance to fight for us. Would you have fought? He asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his tone. Honestly, Claire, if I'd come to you 3 months ago and said I was unhappy, that I felt disconnected, that I needed things to change, would you have fought for us? Or would you have told me you were too busy, too tired, that we'd deal with it later? I wanted to say I would have fought. I wanted to believe that I would have done whatever it took to save our marriage. But the truth was, I didn't know. Maybe he was right. Maybe I would have dismissed his concerns, added them to the long list of things to address when I had more time, more energy, more bandwidth. Maybe I'd been so focused on survival, on getting through each day, that I'd forgotten to actually live, to actually be present in my own life. What happens now? I asked quietly. Marcus took a deep breath. I think we need to separate, at least for a while, so we can both figure out what we really want. You already know what you want, I said. You want her. He didn't deny it. I think she might be what I need right now, but that doesn't mean I don't care about you, Claire. You're the mother of my child. You've been my partner for 10 years. I'll always care about you. Ty, just not enough to stay, I finished for him. Sars, we sat there in silence, the weight of the end of our marriage settling over us like dust after an explosion. Everything I'd thought was solid had turned out to be built on sand, and now it was all washing away, and I was left trying to figure out how to breathe underwater. I'll sleep in the guest room tonight, Marcus finally said, standing up. We can talk more tomorrow. Figure out logistics. Tell Oliver together. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He hesitated like he wanted to say something else, but then he just walked away, leaving me alone in our living room surrounded by all the trappings of the life we'd built together, the photos on the walls, the furniture we'd picked out together, the toys scattered in the corner where Oliver played. I sat there until it was fully dark outside, trying to understand how I'd gotten here, how I'd missed all the signs, how the man I'd loved had become a stranger who belonged to someone else. My phone buzzed again. I'd turned it back on at some point, though I couldn't remember when. There was a text from an unknown number. I think we should talk. This is Sophie. I stared at the message, my heart pounding. The audacity of it was breathtaking. She wanted to talk. She wanted to what? Explain? Apologize? Justify stealing my husband? Before I could stop myself, I was typing back, where? The coffee shop she chose was neutral territory, a generic chain location downtown that neither of us had any attachment to. I arrived first, ordered a coffee I knew I wouldn't drink, and sat at a corner table where I could watch the door. My hands were shaking, and I clasped them together in my lap, trying to project a calm I absolutely did not feel. Sophie arrived exactly on time, and I had to admit she had guts. She walked in looking polished and put together in dark jeans and a cream-coloured sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. She spotted me immediately and crossed the cafe with confident strides, sliding into the chair across from me without asking if it was okay. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, her voice soft but steady. Up close, I could see she looked tired, shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "I know this is probably the last thing you want to do." "Then why did you ask me here?" I said, surprised by how cold my voice sounded. "Good. I wanted to be cold. I wanted to be made of ice." Sophie folded her hands on the table, and I noticed she wore a delicate gold bracelet on her wrist. I wondered if Marcus had given it to her. "Because I think you deserve to hear the truth from me, not just from Marcus. And because I need you to understand that this isn't what I wanted. Not like this." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that made a couple at a nearby table glance over. "You didn't want to sleep with a married man. That's fascinating considering you did it anyway." "I didn't know he was going to mean this much to me," she said, and there was something raw in her voice, something that sounded almost like pain. "When I started at the firm, I admired him professionally. He was brilliant, passionate about his work, respected by everyone. We were assigned to the same project team, and we started spending a lot of time together. Late nights at the office, working dinners, that kind of thing. It was purely professional for months." "When did it stop being professional?" I asked. She looked down at her hands. "There was this night in November. We'd just lost a major bid on a project we'd both poured our hearts into. Marcus was devastated. He felt like he'd let everyone down, and he stayed late at the office, just sitting in the conference room staring at the plans. I stayed with him. I didn't want him to be alone. We talked for hours that night about work, about life, about our dreams and fears and all the things you don't usually share with co-workers." She paused, swallowing hard. "He told me he felt trapped, that he loved his son but felt like he'd lost himself somewhere along the way, that he couldn't remember the last time he'd felt truly excited about anything." "And you decided to fix that for him?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "No," she said firmly, meeting my eyes for the first time. "I decided to be his friend. That's all it was supposed to be. But somewhere along the way, it became more. We'd text late at night, just checking in on each other. We started meeting for coffee before work. He made me laugh. He made me think. He challenged me to be better at my job, to push my boundaries. And I did the same for him. We brought out something in each other that had been dormant." "How poetic," I said flatly. "You still haven't answered my question. When did you sleep with him?" Sophie flinched, and I felt a small, savage satisfaction at causing her discomfort. "The first time was in January. We'd gone to a building materials expo in Portland. Separate hotel rooms, everything proper. But after the conference events ended, we got drinks at the hotel bar. We talked until they closed it down, and then we went back to his room to keep talking, and—" She trailed off, but I could fill in the rest. "Does he know you're here?" I asked. "Does he know you're telling me all of this?" "No," she admitted. "He'd be furious if he knew. He wanted to handle this his own way, to protect you and Oliver from the worst of it. But I don't think that's fair to you. I think you deserve to know exactly what happened and why." "How generous of you," I said. "Except, I don't need you to tell me what I deserve. You've already taken enough from me." "I know," she said quietly. "And I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything coming from me, but I am. I never meant to hurt you. I never meant for any of this to happen." "But it did happen," I said, leaning forward. "And now you're sitting here trying to what? Ease your conscience? Get my blessing? Understand that I will never, ever forgive you for what you've done to my family." Sophie was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know that I love him. This isn't some casual thing for me, Claire. I'm not some homewrecker who gets off on stealing married men. I fell in love with your husband, and he fell in love with me, and we tried to fight it, but we couldn't. How hard did you try? I asked. Because from where I'm sitting, it doesn't look like you tried very hard at all. She stood up abruptly, and I could see tears shining in her eyes. I tried every day. I tried to keep it professional. I tried to put distance between us, but you can't control who you fall in love with, Claire. You just can't. And I'm sorry that it happened to be your husband, but I can't change that now. None of us can. She walked out without another word, leaving me alone at the table with my untouched coffee and a fresh wave of rage and grief crashing over me. I sat there for a long time processing everything she'd said, trying to separate the manipulation from the truth, the self-justification from the genuine emotion. Because despite everything, despite my hatred for her and what she'd done, I'd heard something real in her voice when she talked about Marcus. She did love him, or she thought she did, which amounted to the same thing. And that somehow made everything worse. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus and I existed in a strange limbo. He stayed in the guest room, and we were cordial to each other for Oliver's sake, but the house felt like a war zone with an uneasy ceasefire. We told Oliver that Daddy was sleeping in the guest room because he'd been snoring too much, and Oliver seemed to accept this without question. 6-year-olds are remarkably adaptable, I was learning. They can sense when something is wrong, but they don't always need to understand the details. I told my best friend Meredith everything over wine at her kitchen table on a Tuesday night. Meredith and I had been friends since college, and she was one of those rare people who would help you bury a body, no questions asked. She listened to the whole sordid story without interrupting, her face growing darker with each revelation. "I'm going to kill him," she said when I finally finished. "I'm going to actually murder Marcus Whitmore." "Get in line," I said, taking a large gulp of wine. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Are you really going to let him just leave? Let her win?" "I don't know if it's about winning or losing anymore," I said tiredly. "He doesn't want to be with me, Mer. He made that clear, and I can't force someone to love me." "But you can make his life hell in the divorce," Meredith pointed out. "You can take him for everything he's worth. Alimony, child support, the house. Make him regret ever looking at that blonde bimbo." I smiled despite myself. She's not a bimbo, she's actually really smart. That's part of what makes this so awful. I can't even hate her properly because I understand why he fell for her. "You're too nice," Meredith said, shaking her head. "That's always been your problem. You need to get angry, Claire. Really, truly angry. Use that anger to protect yourself and Oliver." She was right, but anger was exhausting, and I was already so tired. Still, I took her advice and contacted a divorce attorney the next day. Her name was Patricia Nguyen, and she came highly recommended as someone who was both compassionate and ruthless when necessary. I sat in her office in a building overlooking Puget Sound and laid out the situation. "Do you want to try to save the marriage?" Patricia asked, pen poised over her legal pad. "Some couples find that the threat of divorce proceedings focuses their attention and motivates them to work on things." "He's in love with someone else," I said. "He told me so himself. I don't think there's anything left to save." Patricia nodded. "Then we need to focus on protecting your interests and Oliver's. Washington is a no-fault divorce state, so the affair itself won't impact property division, but it can potentially affect custody if we can demonstrate that Marcus's relationship with Miss Chen is detrimental to Oliver's well-being." "I don't want to use Oliver as a weapon," I said quickly. "He loves his father. Marcus is a good dad, even if he's been a terrible husband." "Admirable," Patricia said, making a note, "but naive. You need to understand that Marcus's attorney will likely advise him to fight for 50-50 custody, which means Oliver would spend half his time with his father and, potentially, with Miss Chen as well. Are you comfortable with that scenario?" The thought of Oliver spending weekends at some apartment where Sophie played stepmother made me feel physically ill, but I forced myself to consider it rationally. What are my options? We can push for primary custody with generous visitation for Marcus, Patricia explained. Given that you've been Oliver's primary caregiver while Marcus worked long hours, we have a strong case. We can also request that Marcus refrain from introducing Oliver to any romantic partners until the divorce is finalised and some cooling-off period has passed. That at least I could agree to. The thought of Sophie inserting herself into Oliver's life while the ink on the divorce papers was still wet made my stomach turn. Yes, I said. Let's do that. By the time I left Patricia's office, I had a plan. It felt good to have a plan, even if it was a plan for dismantling my life. At least it was forward motion, action instead of paralysis. When I got home, I found Marcus's mother, Diane, sitting at my kitchen table with Oliver. They were working on a puzzle together, and Diane looked up when I walked in, her expression carefully neutral. "Claire," she said warmly, "I hope you don't mind. Marcus called and asked if I could pick Oliver up from school. He said he had to work late." "Of course not," I said, setting down my purse. "Thanks for doing that." Oliver jumped up and ran over to hug me, chattering about his day, and I held him tight, breathing in the little boy's smell of him, grass and sunshine and the faint scent of the apple-scented soap they used at his school. When he ran back to the puzzle, Diane stood and gestured toward the living room. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. We sat on the couch and Diane folded her hands in her lap, looking uncomfortable. Diane was in her early 60s, a former high school English teacher who'd retired 3 years ago. She was elegant and well-spoken, with short silver hair and kind eyes. I'd always gotten along well with her, better than with my own mother, who lived across the country and had never quite forgiven me for not pursuing a more conventional career. "Marcus told me what's happening," Diane said carefully. "About the separation, about the other woman." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Of course Marcus had told his mother. He was close with her, talked to her several times a week. "I'm sorry you had to find out about that," I said. "Don't apologize," Diane said firmly. "You have nothing to apologize for. Claire, I need you to know that what Marcus is doing, I don't approve. I didn't raise him to handle things this way." I felt tears prick at my eyes at her words. I'd been half expecting her to take her son's side, to make excuses for him, but she was looking at me with genuine sympathy and what looked like disappointment in her son. "Did he tell you everything?" I asked. "About how long it's been going on?" "He told me enough," she said. "And I told him he was making the biggest mistake of his life, that he was throwing away a wonderful wife and destabilizing his son's life. For what? Some young woman who's going to realize in a year or two that she doesn't want to be a stepmother to a child who's not hers. It's madness." "Thank you for saying that," I whispered. "I've been feeling like maybe I'm crazy, like maybe I did something wrong." "No," Diane interrupted. "No, Claire, marriage is hard, and I'm sure there were problems on both sides, but there is never an excuse for infidelity, never. Marcus's father and I went through rough patches over the years, times when we weren't sure we'd make it, but we talked about it, we fought for our marriage, we didn't run to someone else the moment things got difficult." "I wish Marcus felt that way," I said. Diane reached over and squeezed my hand. "I want you to know that no matter what happens between you and Marcus, you will always be family to me. You're Oliver's mother. You've been a daughter to me for 10 years. That doesn't change because my son made a stupid, selfish choice." I broke down then, crying in a way I hadn't allowed myself to since this all started. Diane held me, rubbing my back and making soothing sounds, and for a moment, I felt like I had an ally, someone in Marcus's life who saw this situation for what it was and was willing to stand with me. When Marcus came home that night, actually home, not just sleeping in the guest room but present in the house, he found his mother still there. The look on his face when he walked into the kitchen and saw her sitting with me was priceless. Guilt and apprehension and something that might have been shame all flickered across his features. "Mom," he said carefully, "I didn't know you were still here." "We need to talk," Diane said, standing up. She looked at me. Claire, would you mind giving us a few minutes? I nodded and retreated to the bedroom, but I could hear their voices rising and falling through the walls. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. Diane was reading him the riot act, and Marcus was trying to defend himself. It went on for 20 minutes before I heard the front door close and Marcus's heavy footsteps on the stairs. He didn't come to find me. He went straight to the guest room and shut the door, and I was left wondering what Diane had said to him, whether it would make any difference, whether anything could make a difference at this point. The following weekend, Marcus took Oliver out, just the two of them. He said they were going to the movies, and I was grateful for the time alone. I'd barely had a moment to myself since this nightmare began, and I needed to breathe, to think, to figure out who I was going to be in this new reality. How? I was folding laundry in the bedroom when I found it, a card tucked into the pocket of one of Marcus's jackets that I was about to hang up. It was a birthday card, and when I opened it, I saw Sophie's handwriting. Happy birthday to the man who changed my life. I can't wait to see what our future holds. All my love, S. His birthday had been 2 months ago. We'd celebrated with a small dinner at home, just Marcus, Oliver, and me. He'd seemed distracted that night, I remembered now, kept checking his phone. I'd assumed it was work emails, but now I knew better. He'd been checking messages from her, wishing he could be with her instead of with his family. The card confirmed what I'd already known but hadn't wanted to fully accept. This affair had been going on for much longer than Marcus had admitted. The emotional connection, the planning, the secret life he'd been building with Sophie while still coming home to me every night, the depth of his betrayal took my breath away all over again. I was still holding the card when my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Claire? This is Melissa Harding. We met briefly at the Fletcher Associates holiday party. I racked my brain trying to place the name. Then it came to me. Melissa was one of the senior architects at Marcus's firm, a woman in her 50s with short red hair and a no-nonsense demeanour. Yes, I remember. How did you get my number? From the firm directory, she said. Look, I'm calling because I think there's something you should know. About Marcus and Sophie. My heart started pounding. I already know about the affair. It's not just an affair, Melissa said, her voice urgent. Claire, they're planning to start their own firm together. They've been meeting with investors, drawing up business plans, the whole thing. They're planning to leave Fletcher Associates and take several major clients with them. I sank onto the bed, trying to process this information. What? They've been working on it for months, Melissa continued. I only found out because I overheard a phone call last week. Marcus was in the conference room, talking to some venture capital guy about funding for their startup. He didn't know I was in the office next door. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because if they're starting a business together, that's going to impact your divorce settlement, Melissa said bluntly. If they've been using company resources or time to plan their new venture, that's a violation of their employment contracts. And if they're taking clients with them, Fletcher Associates is going to sue. You need to know what you're walking into, Claire. This isn't just about a marriage ending. It's about your financial future and Oliver's. I thanked her and hung up, my mind reeling. A new business, a whole new life that Marcus had been planning with Sophie. Not just a new relationship, but a complete partnership, professional and personal. They were going to be together all day at work and then come home to each other at night. It was everything he and I had never had, everything he'd apparently always wanted. I called Patricia immediately and relayed what Melissa had told me. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. This changes things significantly, Patricia said. If Marcus is planning to leave his current position and start a business, we need to move quickly. We need to freeze assets, get a complete picture of your marital finances before he starts moving money around. Can you access his financial records? I think so, I said. We have a joint account, and I know where he keeps his statements for his personal accounts. Get me copies of everything, Patricia instructed. Bank statements, investment accounts, retirement funds, credit card statements for the past year. Everything. And don't tell Marcus what you're doing. I spent the next 2 hours going through Marcus's files, photographing documents with my phone, sending them to Patricia's secure email. I felt like a criminal, sneaking through my own house, but Melissa's warning had shaken me. I needed to protect myself and Oliver, and if that meant playing detective in my own home, so be it. What I found terrified me. In the past 6 months, Marcus had moved $40,000 from our savings account into a private account I hadn't known existed. There were wire transfers to something called Chen Whitmore Architectural Solutions, LLC. Their company, apparently, already established and funded with our money. There were charges on his credit card for expensive dinners, hotel rooms, jewelry. He'd been using our family money to finance his affair and his new business venture, and I'd been completely oblivious. When Marcus came home with Oliver that evening, I was waiting for him. Oliver ran off to watch TV, and I cornered Marcus in the kitchen, my phone in my hand with the photographs of his financial records pulled up on the screen. Chen Whitmore Architectural Solutions, I said, my voice shaking with rage. Care to explain? His face went white. How did you… It doesn't matter how I found out, I cut him off. What matters is that you've been stealing from our family to fund your affair and your secret business with your girlfriend. $40,000, Marcus. $40,000 of our money. It's not stealing, he said, but he couldn't meet my eyes. It's my money too, I earned it. We're still married, I said. That makes it marital property. And you used it without my knowledge or consent to start a business with the woman you're cheating on me with. Do you have any idea how this looks? How this is going to look to a judge? Claire, please, he said, and now he looked panicked. Let me explain. The business opportunity came up suddenly. Sophie and I, we have this vision for sustainable architecture that Fletcher Associates isn't interested in pursuing. We needed to move quickly to secure funding and clients. I was going to tell you, I was going to pay back the money. When? I demanded. When were you going to tell me? Before or after you left me for her, before or after you drained our accounts to fund your new life? It's not like that, he insisted. The business is legitimate. It's going to be successful. You'll get your share of everything in the divorce. My share? I repeated incredulously. Marcus, you used marital assets to start a business with your mistress without my knowledge. That's not just ethically wrong. It's legally problematic. And when Fletcher Associates sues you for stealing their clients, which they will, that business you're so excited about is going to be buried in legal fees before it ever gets off the ground. He stared at me, and I could see him realizing that I knew more than he'd thought, that I'd been doing my homework. Who told you about the clients? He asked quietly. Does it matter? I shot back. It's true, isn't it? You and Sophie are planning to poach clients when you leave. He didn't deny it, which was answer enough. We've worked hard on those relationships, he said instead. We brought those clients to Fletcher Associates in the first place. We're not stealing anything. Tell that to your bosses when they take you to court, I said, and tell it to the judge in our divorce case when he or she decides how to divide our assets. Because I promise you, Marcus, I am going to fight for every penny you tried to hide from me, every single penny. I walked away, leaving him standing in the kitchen, and I felt something shift inside me. Meredith had been right. I needed to get angry. I needed to stop being sad and victimized and start fighting back. Marcus had made his choices, and now I was going to make sure he lived with the consequences. Over the next few weeks, the situation escalated rapidly. Patricia filed for divorce on my behalf, and Marcus was served with papers at his office. According to Melissa, who'd become something of an unexpected ally, he'd been furious and humiliated. The papers included a temporary restraining order preventing him from depleting any more marital assets and a motion for me to have primary custody of Oliver with Marcus getting supervised visitation until we could establish a more permanent arrangement. Marcus's attorney fired back with his own motions, claiming I was being vindictive and trying to alienate Oliver from his father. The legal bills started piling up, and I watched our savings, what was left of them, disappear into attorney fees and court costs. But I wasn't backing down. Patricia had done her research and discovered that Marcus and Sophie had been using Fletcher Associates' resources extensively to plan their new business, using company computers, company time, even meeting with potential clients during work hours and on company premises. Fletcher Associates found out, just as Melissa had predicted, and they were livid. They fired both Marcus and Sophie immediately and filed a lawsuit against them for breach of contract and theft of intellectual property. Suddenly, Marcus's dream business was dead in the water before it even launched. Without Fletcher's client list and with the threat of a protracted legal battle hanging over them, investors pulled out. The LLC was dissolved, and Marcus was unemployed with a mortgage, a divorce, and an angry soon-to-be ex-wife who knew exactly how much money he'd tried to hide. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt exhausted. This wasn't what I'd wanted. I'd wanted my marriage to work. I'd wanted to grow old with Marcus, to raise Oliver together, to have the life we'd planned. Instead, I was watching everything crumble, and even though Marcus had brought it on himself, there was no satisfaction in his downfall. Just sadness and waste and the growing realization that my son was going to pay the price for his parents' failures. One night, about 2 months into the divorce proceedings, there was a knock on my door. It was late, after 9, and Oliver was already asleep. I looked through the peephole and was shocked to see Sophie standing on my porch. I opened the door, prepared to tell her to leave, but the look on her face stopped me. She looked awful, no makeup, hair pulled back in a messy bun, eyes swollen and red from crying. "I know you don't want to see me," she said before I could speak, "but please, I need to talk to you. It's important." Against my better judgment, I let her in. We sat in the living room, an ocean of space between us on the couch, and I waited for her to speak. "It's over," she said finally. "Marcus and me. It's over." I felt my stomach drop, even though I couldn't understand why. "What happened?" "Everything," she said, her voice breaking. "Losing our jobs, the lawsuit, the business falling apart, the stress of it all. We turned on each other. He blamed me for encouraging him to leave Fletcher Associates. I blamed him for not being honest about his financial situation. We fought constantly. And then—" She trailed off, wiping at her eyes. "Then what?" I prompted. "Then I found out I'm pregnant," she whispered. The room seemed to tilt sideways. "You're— what?" "10 weeks," she said. "I just found out last week, and when I told Marcus, he—" She couldn't finish the sentence, just dissolved into tears. I sat there frozen, trying to process this information. Sophie was pregnant with Marcus's child. Oliver was going to have a half-sibling. The situation had just become infinitely more complicated. "What did Marcus say?" I finally managed to ask. Sophie looked up at me, and the pain in her eyes was devastating. "He told me to get rid of it. He said he couldn't handle another child right now, that the timing was terrible, that he was barely holding it together as it is. He gave me money and told me to take care of it." "Oh my God," I breathed. "I told him I couldn't do that," Sophie continued. "That this baby wasn't a mistake, that I wanted to keep it. And he lost it. He screamed at me, said I was trying to trap him, that I'd ruined his life. Then he left, and I haven't heard from him since. That was 3 days ago." We sat in silence for a long moment. I should have felt vindication, should have been glad that their relationship had imploded, that Sophie was getting a taste of the pain she'd helped inflict on me. But looking at her sitting there, young and scared and pregnant and alone, I just felt pity. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked gently. "Because you're still his wife," she said. "Legally, technically, you're still married. And because you know him better than anyone. You've been with him for 10 years. You know how to handle him when he's like this. She looked at me with desperate eyes. I need your help, Claire. I don't know what to do. The irony wasn't lost on me. The other woman, the one who'd destroyed my marriage, was now asking me for help dealing with my estranged husband. It would have been funny if it wasn't so tragic. I can't help you, I said finally. I'm sorry, Sophie, but I can't. You made your choice when you got involved with Marcus. These are the consequences. She nodded, like she'd expected that answer. I understand. I'm sorry for everything, Claire. I really am. I wish I could take it all back. But you can't, I said. None of us can. She left, and I stood at the window watching her walk to her car. And I felt the strangest mix of emotions, anger and pity and fear, and a weird sort of protective instinct. Because whatever Sophie had done, whatever mistakes she'd made, the baby she was carrying was innocent. That baby was Oliver's sibling. That baby was connected to my son, to my family, whether I liked it or not. I called Marcus the next morning. He answered on the fourth ring, sounding exhausted. Claire, what is it? Sophie came to see me last night, I said. She told me about the baby. There was a long silence. She had no right to involve you in that. She's pregnant with your child, Marcus. That involves me whether you like it or not. That baby is Oliver's sibling. If she keeps it, he said, and there was something cold in his voice I'd never heard before. You can't seriously expect her to terminate the pregnancy, I said, appalled. I can't handle this right now, Claire, he snapped. I'm barely keeping my head above water. I've lost my job. I'm being sued by my former employer. I'm in the middle of a divorce. I can't take on a baby with a woman I'm not even with anymore. You should have thought about that before you slept with her, I said sharply. You don't get to make a baby and then decide it's inconvenient. Don't lecture me, he said. You have no idea what I'm going through. You're right, I said. I don't know what you're going through, but I know what I went through, what you put me through. And now you're doing the same thing to Sophie. You make promises you don't keep. You bail when things get hard. That's who you are, Marcus. And that baby deserves better. I hung up before he could respond, my heart pounding with anger and disgust. This was the man I'd married, the father of my child. This was the man I'd thought I'd grow old with. And I didn't recognize him anymore. The final twist came 2 weeks later when Patricia called me with news that stopped my world cold. Claire, I need you to sit down, she said, her voice grave. What is it? I asked, already dreading the answer. We've been going through Marcus's financial records as part of Discovery, and we found something. Something big. Okay, I said slowly. The money Marcus transferred to start the business with Sophie, the $40,000. It didn't all come from your joint savings. Where did it come from? Patricia took a deep breath. From Oliver's college fund. Marcus liquidated Oliver's entire college fund, $65,000, and used it to fund his business venture. Combined with the money from your savings, he'd moved over $100,000 into accounts he'd hidden from you. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. He stole from our son? Technically, as Oliver's parent, he had legal access to the account, Patricia explained. But morally, ethically, and from a family law perspective, it looks terrible. He raided his 6-year-old's college fund to start a business with his mistress. I couldn't breathe. Everything else, the affair, the lies, the betrayal of our marriage vows, that had been about me and Marcus. But this was about Oliver. This was Marcus taking from his own child, depriving his son of his future to fund his fantasy with Sophie. What do we do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. We use it, Patricia said grimly. In court, this demonstrates a pattern of financial irresponsibility and a disregard for Oliver's welfare. It strengthens our case for primary custody and for you receiving a larger share of the marital assets. Marcus just handed us the ammunition we needed to win. The custody hearing was set for the following month, and as the date approached, I watched Marcus unravel. He'd moved into a small apartment, was doing freelance work to pay his bills, and according to Diane, he looked terrible. Hadn't been eating or sleeping, was drinking too much. Sophie had decided to keep the baby and had moved back to California to be near her parents. She and Marcus weren't speaking. The night before the hearing, Marcus showed up at the house. It was late and he looked rough, unshaven, rumpled clothes, eyes bloodshot. For a moment I almost felt sorry for him. "Can I come in?" he asked. I let him in, but I didn't offer him a seat. We stood in the foyer, and the silence stretched between us. "I'm sorry," he finally said, "for all of it, for the affair, for the lies, for the money, for Oliver's college fund. I thought I was doing the right thing, building something better for all of us, but I was just destroying everything instead." "Yes," I said simply. "You were." "I don't expect you to forgive me," he continued. "But tomorrow in that courtroom, I need you to know that I love Oliver. Whatever else I've done wrong, whatever mistakes I've made, I'm still his father. I still want to be in his life." "Then you should have thought about that before you stole his college fund," I said coldly. He flinched. "I'm going to pay it back, every penny. It'll take time, but I'll do it." "It's not about the money, Marcus," I said. "It's about the fact that you were willing to take from your own child." "What kind of father does that?" "A desperate one," he said quietly. "A stupid, desperate, selfish one who thought he could have everything and ended up with nothing." I looked at him standing there, this man I'd loved for 10 years, this stranger wearing his face, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even pity. Just a vast, empty space where all my feelings for him used to be. "You need to leave," I said. He nodded and turned to go, but stopped at the door. "For what it's worth, I really did love you once. That wasn't a lie. But somewhere along the way, I lost myself, and I lost us, and I didn't know how to find my way back." "Good night, Marcus," I said, and closed the door on him and on our marriage and on all the dreams we'd once shared. The next day, standing in family court with Patricia by my side and Marcus across the room with his attorney, I felt strangely calm. The judge listened to both sides, reviewed the evidence, and asked pointed questions about Marcus's financial decisions and his current employment situation. When it was over, she awarded me primary physical custody of Oliver, with Marcus receiving supervised visitation every other weekend and 1 evening per week. The college fund that Marcus had depleted would be replenished through garnishment of Marcus's income until the full amount was restored with interest. It wasn't a complete victory. Marcus was still Oliver's father, still had rights and responsibilities, but it was enough. Enough to protect my son, enough to ensure his future was secure, enough to give me the foundation to rebuild our lives. As we left the courthouse, Patricia squeezed my shoulder. "You did it," she said. "You fought back, and you won." But as I drove home, to relieve Diane, who'd been watching Oliver, I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I felt like everyone had lost. Me, Marcus, Sophie, Oliver, the baby Sophie was carrying. There were no winners in situations like this, just survivors. Oliver was waiting when I got home, working on a Lego castle at the kitchen table with Diane. When he saw me, his face lit up, and he ran over to hug me. "Mummy, come see what Grandma and I built." I held him tight, breathing in that little boy's smell, and thought about how resilient children are, how they adapt to new realities without even realizing how much has changed. Oliver would grow up with divorced parents, with a father who visited on weekends, with a half-sibling he might barely know. It wasn't the life I'd imagined for him, but it would still be a good life. I would make sure of that. That night, after Oliver was asleep, I sat in the quiet house and finally let myself cry. Not for Marcus, not for our marriage, but for all the ways things might have been different if we'd been braver, more honest, more willing to fight for what we had instead of running from it. but you can't build a life on might-have-beens. You can only move forward with what is. And what was, for now, was enough. Oliver was safe. We had a home. We had each other. The rest, the healing, the rebuilding, the slow process of becoming whole again, would come in time. Outside, rain started to fall the way it always does in Seattle, washing the world clean, and I sat in the darkness and listened to it drumming against the windows, thinking about beginnings and endings and all the messy, complicated space in between.